Welcome to the More Than Anxiety podcast. I'm MEGANDEVITO, and I help ambitious women break out of the anxiety cycle that keeps them frustrated and stuck. Get ready for a lighthearted approach that will change what you think, how you feel, and what you believe about yourself. This podcast is full of simple steps, a lot of truth talk, and inspiration to take action so you walk away feeling confident, calm, and ready to live. Let's get to it. Welcome to episode 107 of the More Than Anxiety podcast. My name is Megan, and I'm super excited today to be able to introduce you to Linzie Hermsmeyer. Linzie helps ambitious former female athletes in their 30s become purposeful leaders and thriving entrepreneurs, excelling both professionally and personally. She's a dynamic entrepreneur, a fun interview, and a former college athlete with a background in basketball and rodeo. This is going to be such a fun episode. I don't want to take up too much of your time when Linzie can definitely tell you more about all of the great work she does with athletes and entrepreneurs. You're going to love this one. I could talk sports and coaching all day long. So this is a treat for me and for you as well. Enjoy. Welcome to episode 107 of the More Than Anxiety podcast. I promised you this was going to be a really fun interview, and I get to introduce you to Linzie. Linzie, tell them, I made a little introduction. Go ahead and introduce yourself so everybody knows what you do.
Yeah, for sure. First of all, thanks for having me on. I've been so pumped ever since you mentioned it. So I'm glad to be here. So I'm Linzie Hermsmeyer, and I am a coach for former female athletes in their 30s, and I help them excel personally and professionally. So we can become, thriving leaders, whether we're at home or at work. So my husband and I live here in Nebraska, so it gets real cold. But thankfully, the weather is great right now, so that's really fun. We get to do life together, and I'm, again, just excited to be here.
Okay. So athletes, how athletes, why athletes? What made you, this is such a fun niche. And I was just telling Linzie that I used to be a swim coach. My kids were all swimmers, so I can talk swimming and kind of football forever, but I want to know what led you to coach athletes?
Yeah. So I am a former athlete myself. I played a couple years of college basketball and then transferred to compete in college rodeo. So just kind of different aspects of sports. Really, man, I'm just so passionate about it. I just obviously enjoy doing it, but then just what comes out of playing sports is just amazing. And so, I was actually a life coach for women before, and honing in, working with ambitious former female athletes has been a blast. It's something I'm passionate about. It can be such a hard transition from, competing to then real life. You're in your career, you're, building a family, whatever it looks like. And there's not this level of community or accountability that, these women once had, or this coach who is helping them, directing them, giving them a clear path. And now they don't have that anymore. So that's one of the reasons. I just love giving direction and just, diving into how they can be intentional with their life right now.
I think you're in such a sweet spot right now too, because you're getting so much famous backup. I think we started, several years ago when Michael Phelps kind of he retired, he came out of retirement, but now we've got Simone Biles, we've got Noah Lyles, and all of these Olympians, these athletes, professional athletes who are talking about, look, I am more than a swimmer. I am more than a gymnast or a track star or a basketball player or a football player. And there's so much structure involved in sport and being competitive at your sport, but who you are when you leave your sport, when you retire, or when you're not on the field or on the court. I think we forget sometimes that there's a lot going on in people's lives that maybe we don't see it when they're competing, but they've just got such a great narrative going on right now that you get to feed into. And I've seen this, even with my kids who are not going to the Olympics and who my youngest just turned 16 the other day.
And I was like, what do you think? Like, do you think you want to swim in college? And she's like, no. And I'm like, okay. No, that's fine. I mean, it really is. It's such a huge commitment, but knowing how to take care of themselves. So when you say that, like, what do you wish that more athletes knew, or how do those athletes turn into ambitious women? Because I think we know about taking care of our mental health, but how about, like, when you think about taking care of your mental health, how does that improve performance?
So good. Initially, I think mindset. And I might have to explain this a little more too, but I think for me, when I was in college, my mindset at times was terrible. My thoughts would, I mean, you get it. You coach and help people with anxiety. But my thoughts would lead to, just places that, man, I couldn't compete as well. And it was just, and my mental health wasn't as good as it could have been. And that, it just trickles into every area of our life. So I think, with mindset is a huge thing. I think that would be so helpful for athletes to have more of that. Instead of here, take on all of this responsibility, performance, like all of the things. And performance makes me also think of identity. I think when we put our identity in something that could be taken away so easily, our mental health, I mean, it can go down the drain, right? Because that's where if we put our value and our worth in how we're performing, how we did in college or when we were an athlete, and it can translate into real life now too, if we're still putting, our worth in our success or how well we're doing at work, where our relationships or friendships are at, all of those things, can really, really impact our mental health. And so just keeping our identity, in Christ. I'm a Christian. And so I just really, he is the firm foundation. And so, keeping our identity in that, in him, a big.
Yeah. I think it's very easy to typecast people too. And we see it, I mean, from a very young age, when you have a kid who's maybe talented at t-ball and suddenly you're like, this is going to be the greatest kid. And suddenly this kid is wrapped up in t-ball. And I mean, especially with maybe younger kids, but I think even as adults, we change. And you have your sport, you have this, and you have so many other things. And I love that you talk about your faith and your identity and who you are to your core, which is so important. And just realizing that we're a whole person and not just this thing or this thing. So, like with working with these female athletes, when you talk about how their lives are shaped by their sport and what comes after their sport, I know that you talk a lot about grit. So tell me how things come into play. Like, how does all of this come together?
Yeah. So I talk a lot about grit, and that's actually what I named my 90-day program, because it means courage and resolve and strength of character. And so, as we go into the workforce, as we, I'm also big on self-leadership. I used to talk about or hear people talk about leadership, and it's like, well, yeah, I'm not like a CEO of this big corporation, or, I'm not, leading at church in different senses. And so it was just like, well, that's not really for me, which is so false. We are leading ourselves every day. And, by the small decisions that we make in those moments of discipline, and it takes grit to do the right thing. It takes courage to, stay disciplined in what we need to do. So, that word, it was, as I was naming my program, it kept coming up. And as I learned more about it, it was just like, yep, that's where we're going to camp out on that word. So, yeah.
It's such a good one. And Linzie, I love that you touched on the idea of ambition and kind of saying, well, I'm not really a leader. I just the other day finished a podcast that I talked about, I was on the phone with a client and they said, well, I mean, my goals are kind of silly. I mean, I'm not, I mean, it's just their goal was really to spend more time with their family, to be present, to, set a good example. And I was like, whoa, hey, why do you think that's silly? And I think when we use words like ambitious and grit, we get this idea of like, I'm supposed to be a CEO. I'm supposed to be out there trying to conquer the world. And I think it's so important for people to say, hey, if you have anything that you want to accomplish, it takes a lot of ambition to be a working parent. It takes a lot of ambition some days just to get up and decide to work out or to clean your house. I mean, ambition isn't reserved for people like, I don't know, who am I even want to think of here? It's not reserved for people like Kamala Harris. Yeah, for sure. She's got ambition. Go her. And if you are like working out of your kitchen, you've got ambition because there are dirty dishes in the sink and they're screaming at you too. And sometimes ambition just looks different for everybody. So when you talk about personal ambition, tell me a little bit more what that looks like for people, because I do think that when we say ambition, some people are like, oh yeah, I'm not that person.
Yeah. So I really like that because when I break the word grit down, I talk about growth. And so that's one of those things that like we can be doing every day that like you're saying, I think, let me take it back to this. So when I think of ambition, like sometimes I would think about those people who are like accomplishing these ginormous goals. And I was like intimidated. It's like, wait a minute, how am I even supposed to reach that? Like, what do I do to get there? All of those things. And so, the G in grit growth is like, how can we grow each day towards those goals or towards, becoming that person that we want to be, becoming like taking on that identity of I am an ambitious person. And like you're saying, it's those small daily habits. It's those small things that it does take ambition to get it done. And then, resilience is R in grit. Again, just building up like the capacity. I hear women talk about that. Like, I don't have the capacity. And I think, I was in college when I heard Craig Rochelle talking about expanding your capacity. And I think we can always strive for that because when we do that, we are more able to be ambitious in the areas that we want to be. And then the I is intentionality. So like you're saying, sometimes we can feel like those goals of, like I want to be present or I want to be more of this or that. It can like, when they said it was silly, it's like, no way, you're being so intentional. And I love how you say that. It's like, you're encouraging your client, like, this is a great goal. And then the T, tenacity, determination, and which, again, it's not easy to do that every day, but we are growing towards that and we are continually practicing. So, it's not about perfection. Perfection, I always say, is like impossible and boring. So we're not about that. We're about growth and, moving in the direction that we want to go.
I think that perfection is a funny thing and it comes up so often with people. I just want it to be perfect. I'm like, well, you tell me what your perfect is. And I'll tell you what my perfect is. And then you can decide which perfect you're going for. Because perfect is like saying it's too cold out.
Yeah.
To who? Your cold and my cold are not the same thing. It's very ambiguous. And I think that we do get stuck in this place where we're like, this is what I think it's supposed to look like. I used to call this Martha Stewart syndrome, where I would look at a catalog or I would look at the magazine and be like, yeah, never going to get there. It was so overwhelming to me. It's such a silly thing to be overwhelmed about. But at that point, my kids were little and I would look around and think, no, it's impossible. It's impossible. And I remember thinking, okay, wait a minute. Remember, this is a staged magazine, like a photo shoot. This was probably before Instagram and everything, where I'm like, that's what it's supposed to look like. I am in so much trouble. But yeah, I think that that idea of perfectionism, but I also want to touch briefly on the idea of resilience. I don't know if you're seeing this with the people that you help, but I feel like there's this idea that everything should be easy and should go together seamlessly. Like we're in this place in time where it's like,
yeah,
that sounds rough.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that with the idea of expanding your resilience and your capacity for more, it also shrinks very quickly, because when we don't get out there and we don't start pushing ourselves to do things that are hard or uncomfortable or different, that resilience and that capacity shrinks. And it's like a balloon that you almost like suck the air out of so that it's inside of itself. How do you handle that resilience with your clients?
Hey, I talk with a lot of anxious women, and more often than not, what I hear is how overwhelmed they feel. They know that their schedules are too full, they know their brains are too full, but they have no idea what to do about it or what's causing it. Trying to balance work and home responsibilities, keep everything running smoothly and everybody happy, then to do it perfectly is emotionally, mentally, and physically exhausting. So I created a short 5-question quiz to help you get to the bottom of why you feel so overwhelmed and to give you some solutions to help you feel less stressed and anxious and more confident. Because when you know what you're doing that's causing you to stress, you can swap habits to create more space for yourself to rest and relax. Resting and relaxing makes it easier to think clearly, to work efficiently, and to still have time for yourself to go do the stuff you've been wanting to do. And wouldn't it feel amazing to be confident, to feel calm, and to be able to go have fun again? I mean, I think so. You can take that quiz using the link in the podcast show notes and have a very first step forward out of overwhelm in less than 5 minutes.
Ooh, so good. So good. The other day I had to push myself to get something accomplished that I did not want to do. And it just came to me. It was like, man, okay, this is what it feels like to get reps in, to like continually practice and continually get better. And so it's like, in sports, we practice for however long a day. We're getting those reps in. We're building that resilience, that capacity to be able to accomplish more on the court or, swimming. And so it's just like, why do we think now, now that we are in our careers or, leading in our home, that it just comes naturally. And it's like, no, we do need to still get the reps in. We still need to practice and continue to expand our capacity rather than staying stuck like you're talking about. So, I really like that you brought that up. And I know in one of my masterminds, one of my clients mentioned, man, it just feels like after school, I just quit growing. And I think that can happen for so many of us. It's like, we had these teachers in place. We had these coaches in place. We had these people that we were doing hard things with side by side almost every day. And now it's like, we don't have that as adults sometimes, and we have to seek it out and be intentional about that. So, I like that you bring that up because it's such a big intentionality piece to it.
Mm-hmm. There's such a weird space between when you graduate from college and it's like suddenly you just get dropped into this foreign place where your life has been structured, especially for athletes, when it's like, no, there's practice, there's school, there's sleep, there's practice, school, sleep. But for anybody who comes out of that experience where, okay, we go to school from the time we're 5 years old until at least 18. And then if you go to college, sometimes it's 22, 23, 24, however old you are. And then it's like nothing. And your structure's gone. Your friend group is gone. Everything that, you have to pay your own bills. You're doing all of these things that I have a kid in this place right now where he's coming out the other side. He's been out of college for almost 2 years now, but he's like, I don't know what to do with myself. I don't know what to do. I don't know I don't have any friends. I don't know And I was like, I don't know, you've got friends, you've got it. You just have moved from this little kind of pre-made ecosystem of school into figure it out.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's 100% it.
Yeah. And we're just left dangling there in this place to figure it out. And that's a really big thing, I think, for people to do. And it's so important to think that, when we look at different phases of life and where we are, we're all just figuring it out. I think people look at athletes, or they look at CEOs, or they look at a mom who has teenagers versus a mom who has babies, like little, newborns. None of us know what we're doing.
Right.
Yeah. So what do you do when somebody comes to you and they're like, what's the right way? Or how do you do it? Like, how do you handle things like that?
Yeah. Woo, such a good question. There's this quote, again, Craig Groeschel, just highly recommend. He talks about our lives are moving in the direction of our strongest thoughts. And do we like the direction our lives are going in? So I do like to start out with, what is your thought life looking like? Because that is something that, impacted me so much as an athlete. After all through life, we're going to experience these narratives that we have going on, these limiting beliefs, like a lot of these things we've heard about. But when I get to work with somebody and dig into what are you actually thinking, and I've had it be before, we started a session before and she was like, no, I don't think I have any, and I was like,
you do.
I loved it. I was like, okay, we're going to dig in a little bit more here because the way that we do life, or things that, we feel like just isn't aligning with how we want to be or accomplish, or whatever it is, it stems so much from our thoughts. And so as we dug in more, it just kind of uprooted some of those things that she didn't even know she was doing, or those thoughts that she was having. And so that is where I do like to start a lot of times, is what is that looking like for you? And how do we need to switch that mindset? So again, that quote just, it impacted me big time in college. And it's always just a good reminder of, what am I thinking about? Because that's where my life is headed. So
well, first of all, that was like a total mic drop quote. I love that quote. And, but I think it is funny. We don't pay attention to our thoughts unless they're scaring us. If they scare us, they take all of our attention. But any other day, we just let them float through like it's the truth. I don't have any thoughts. You do all day long, so many. But we just assume that we think it and it's true, or we don't pay any attention to it. But you're exactly right. I think that idea of what's your thought life? Your thoughts make your life happen. And so many people are like, I don't have thoughts about that. And I'm like, you have so many thoughts about that. But getting to that place where we actually stop and notice, oh, that's just a thought, and not for crying out loud, believing every single thing that floats through our brains.
Yes. That is such a good point.
Yeah. I mean, especially, I don't know, I work with a lot of people who are anxious, and I know you do too, that especially when they get to the place where those anxious thoughts are driving their behaviors, and they solidify those thoughts, and they get stuck because they just feel so real.
Yep. Yeah. The more we think a thought, the more it happens. Like you're saying, solidifies in those neural pathways. And it's like, again, if we don't know that that's happening, if we don't know it, then it just can over run our lives. And that's what was happening with me in college, and it sucked. Like, it was just not fun. And so I don't want that for other people. And so, I just love getting to dive into mindset, and it's so much deeper sometimes.
It's really just ultimate mindfulness, right? I think a lot of times people say mindfulness. So that's like when I go outside and I try to feel the wind, or I do the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 method. And my answer is always yes. And it's really noticing what's going on in your mind and realizing that you get to choose those things. That was a huge revelation to me, that I'm like, wait a minute, I can choose what I think. That's an option. I don't know. Obviously, I think that like if I would have stopped to think about it, it would have made sense. But I remember hearing that, and it was just such a turning point in my life and how I related to myself, how I related to anxiety and everything else. But really, for anyone who has not spent any time journaling or paying attention to their thoughts, that's earth-shattering stuff.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I remember this time there's such a big contrast between these two things that happened in my life. And I wish I could say this was longer ago. I mean, it was a while ago, but it was like, as I was building my business, I let my thoughts go. Like I wasn't being intentional about knowing what they are, what to do, about it. And so it led ultimately to like an anxiety attack. And it wasn't, like full blown to some extent that some people experience. Mm-hmm. But the contrast was then, okay, whoa, something needs to change, like what am I thinking about? How am I living life every day? What do I need to change? And as you know, that's just like my body was telling me something's got to be different. And then the contrast of, a while later, it was like I was about to let my thoughts run me again. It was like, no, heck no, we're not doing that again, and it's like, okay, I got to do something. And so it really was like, I think that night I got up, I like journaled, I read a little bit, replacing the ick with what is real and true and positive and not toxic positivity, but like the actual real thing. And so just the contrast of those two things, what led to different outcomes was being intentional about, nope, we're stopping this. We're doing something different.
So good. Yeah. Capturing your thoughts. And really, these are the things that I wish we taught in school.
Right.
I wish that we could teach kids, hey, we're going to think on purpose. And since we're thinking on purpose, we also have to pay attention to what we're thinking on purpose. And I think that, especially in the place where we are right now, with so many kids who are really struggling with mental health issues, I mean, from kindergarten all the way through college, and adults too. I think that's so good. But that's some really, really good stuff. And I'm so excited to be able to tell people how they can work with you. So tell them what you do, what you offer, where they can find you. And of course, I will always put all of these things in the show notes. So anyone listening to this, whether it's on YouTube or wherever you listen, it will be there. Click the links and make sure that you are connecting with Linzie. But yeah, tell us more.
Yeah. So I offer GRIT, this program. It's a 90-day in-depth mastermind. Also, there's personalized one-on-one coaching with it. There's monthly trainings, and it's all curated specifically for former female athletes. And so if someone is interested in working with me, they can book a free consultation. I'd love to get to know them, their goals, and just how we can move forward in a good way and, help them get unstuck.
Yes.
Book that free consultation and I'd love to visit with them.
That is fantastic. All right. And you are on social media?
Absolutely. Yep. Linzie Hermsmeyer on Instagram and same on LinkedIn. I spend most of my time on Instagram. So love to connect with people there.
Perfect. Linzie, this has been so much fun. I've loved talking with you. You guys, she's got everything you need. You need to reach out, check out her program, look for GRIT, tag people in this who need to hear it. Tag your athlete friends, tag their parents or their siblings or whoever else needs this, or just really ambitious women who are out there that need some support. So, Linzie, thank you so much for joining me today. It has been a joy.
Thanks for having me. I love what you're doing, and I just I've enjoyed having a conversation with you.
Thank you. It's been so much fun.
Yeah.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the More Than Anxiety podcast. Before you go, be sure to subscribe and leave a review so others can easily find this resource as well. And of course, if you're ready to feel calm, to stop overthinking, and have a lot more fun, you can go to the show notes, click the link, and talk to me about coaching. I'll talk to you soon.